This video is requested by you. How can anger be useful in relationship and how can I express it in a healthy way? So today I'm going to show you how to tap into the intelligence of your anger, particularly when it comes to setting boundaries. And I'll show you how to reparent your anger so that you can express what you need to express in a mature, healthy, and productive way that's not going to cause any harm. And stick around to the end of the lesson because I'm going to show you a real life example of how to do that, how to set those boundaries when you are angry. And if you're new to this channel, welcome. My name is Amy Kerr, and I help women who get anxious in love and attract unhealthy relationship cycles to heal their self-worth and feel safe, confident, and secure in their body so that they can date to create the relationship that they really desire. And if you want more content like this, please click the subscribe button, hit the bell notification so that you get notified when I post new content like this, because I'm doing that every week. Now, before we begin, I want to let you know that a few places have opened up on my calendar for a free one-to-one strategy session with me for the Love by Design program. If you want to know more about how to apply for that, stick around to the end of the lesson. So let's firstly look at what unhealthy anger looks like. Resentment, irritability, contempt, annoyance. It's like this constant little reverberation inside of you, either with your partner or in life. You might be at work. This lesson really applies to all sorts of relationships, but it shows up as patterns that happen again and again. Regardless of the partner that you have or whatever they're doing, you get angry in certain similar ways. And that's because the core of the anger actually started when you're in childhood and people were transgressing your boundaries, often your primary caregivers. And that resulted in what I call these core wounds, these singular ways that we feel hurt, and as we move through life they get re-triggered again and again. Now I'll show you how to learn to understand the core of your anger, and how that actually acts in terms of what you experienced as a child. But it's important to know that we're often not truly in touch with the real depth of our anger. It actually comes out at a surface level in the ways I mentioned: resentment, mistrust, annoyance, those kinds of things. And we often actually blanket it with this feeling of anxiety or insecurity or fear because we're not actually really willing to feel the feelings of anger underneath that. And then what happens is, because we keep blanketing it, it eventually just completely erupts, right? You've been bottling it up for so long that it just erupts and we have no control over it. So if that's you, make sure you watch the whole lesson because I'm going to show you how to actually look at it and work with it so that you don't bottle things up and erupt later on. Now, the problem with unhealthy anger is it actually is operating out of our awareness. We haven't become aware of what's internally actually going on, which is what I'm going to show you in a minute. And because we have this unconscious wounded response, we're acting unconsciously as well. So we'll feel out of control with our anger. We'll be lashing out, or we'll have this internal critical voice that will either be speaking critically of people around us or speaking critically of ourselves. And if you have a pattern of always externalizing problems, blaming other people and being in a victim mindset, this lesson is for you. So let's look at the anatomy of anger. The little red wave there is what it appears to look like at the surface, which I've already mentioned: resentment, contempt, irritation. And this is external as well as internal. But it's actually in response to, only 10% is in response to what's going on in your present life. Your partner didn't do the dishes, someone said something yucky to you at work. 90% of what's actually going on with you when you're angry is to do with your past wounding. And these can be attributed to these core wounds that get reiterated again and again. And you might be thinking, what on earth has my work colleague saying something unpleasant to me got to do with my childhood? And the answer is in how you respond to it, because how that person shows up to you is, again, only 10% of it, and we have a choice as to how we respond. If we're responding unhealthily, we are unawares of our subconscious wounding. And when we don't feel we have a choice, it means that there is something that is controlling us, and I'm going to show you how to get on top of that today. So when we aren't self-aware, as I've said, we actually mix the present and past together as the 100%. We can't see the parts underneath, and that's when we kind of lash out unconsciously. Or we might lash out consciously, but what we feel inside is far bigger than what the actual situation, should dictate. And we might feel shame around that. Why did I get so angry over something so small? What's wrong with me? This is the reason why. And it actually makes sense, because what's going on is we're seeing something happen in our present, but we're actually having a response from our past, our however many years of our life that we've been re-experiencing the same trigger again and again and again in various different forms. It started with our parents, then our teachers, then our school kids. So it's kind of like a snowball is built up behind of us, and all it takes is that straw on the camel's back and we have this massive response. So let's take an example. If your partner consistently doesn't take out the trash and your response is that they're not caring for you, they're not looking after you. Now, it's only the trash, right? That's the 10%, but the 90% is you experiencing, say, your father not showing up for you again and again. And that is at its core an abandonment wound that's come from a primary caregiver, and the straw on the camel's back is your partner not taking out the trash. Please let me know in the comments below if this is making sense for you as to why your anger response sometimes doesn't match the situation that's going on at hand. I'd love to hear from you. So anger is actually a very intelligent part of us when we learn how to separate out the parts. So let's do that now. Separation gives us the space to choose to act and respond in a healthy way. Now, instead of that 100% that's all mixed together, we're separating them out to understanding that 10% of that present actually needs now a boundary for us to set and to follow through. Something needs to be communicated around how they're not showing up. You need to say something around that. And then 90% is going to be data for us to collect about our own internal patterns. These familiar feelings we've been feeling our whole life, and knowing that they don't have anything to do with the 10% that's appearing in front of you in the form of your partner not taking out the trash. It's actually inner work for us to be done. And an example of that is to do some inner child work on those wounds. And if you want to know more about how to work with your inner child, watch this video next. Now, it's really important that in this diagram here, you can identify what is your responsibility. And actually, it's all your responsibility when you are getting angry. But knowing that that 10% needs to have a boundary and a follow-through set around it. And then the 90% is really your responsibility to look at what your past patterns are and break through and heal them. So anytime you get angry, it is your responsibility to separate out the parts and to look at them. Now, it's so much easier just to deflect and to say, well, that person's not taking out the trash consistently. Of course, they don't love me. But you'll be creating these endemic patterns in your relationship where, your partner's going to feel criticized. And as I've already mentioned, your response is often inflated and isn't appropriate for the situation. It really affects intimacy. Resentment and contempt are some of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. So getting a hold of these patterns is so important, and taking responsibility is the key piece here. So if there's one thing you take away from this needs to be it. The level of your resentment, irritation, anger, contempt that you feel towards someone on a consistent basis is directly related to the level of boundary setting and internal work you are not doing. And then you might say, well, it's not my fault if that person keeps choosing to cross my boundaries, right? I set the boundary and they're still doing it. Part of boundary setting is actually setting consequences as well, because someone who knows where your edges are and they consistently choose to cross it is a situation that requires consequences that are appropriate to the level of relationship you have with that person. We can't ever change what other people do, but we can let them know where our edges are and what our capacities are. And then we can see whether they respond to us with respect and with understanding and honesty as well. And that will show us if they're a healthy person to be in relationship with, whatever context or not. Now, the real truth of the situation is that people and relationships that make us angry, or that bring anger up in us, should I say, are real gifts in our life, because we get to keep healing. We get to keep experiencing this trigger and keep working with it. And as someone who's been doing it for a while, yes, the wounds keep happening, but you get more adept and more mature at handling them and acknowledging them. And you get to practice healthy communication and boundary setting with people based on that. And it is simply a skill. It is something that you can learn and practice over time. So let's take a real life example of someone that you're dating perhaps, and you're maybe wanting to be in relationship with them, but they seem hot and cold and you're not at that stage yet. And what's actually happening with you, because they're hot and cold, it's triggering your abandonment wound, or it's making you feel a really similar way that you felt when you were a child, when the love was inconsistent with your caregivers. So the first thing you need to do is separate out the 10% and the 90%. So the 10% is what's not okay in this situation. That is that they're inconsistent. This person that you're dating, they're just not showing up for you in a consistent way. And the 90% is your internal world. You're feeling abandoned, you're feeling triggered in that deeper way. The second step is to reparent that deeper wound, because it's actually okay for someone to not be consistent when dating you. It is simply a signal that they're not an appropriate person to go into a relationship with. But it wasn't okay for your parents to not show up for you in a consistent way. So you need to do that inner child work to work with your abandonment wound and separate it out from this person that you're dating. And in order to do that, the way you handle it is to then, the next step, to set a boundary around that 10% of what you're experiencing and say, hey, you seem really hot and cold to me. I really like you, but I'd love to know more about what's going on for you. And set a boundary around that. Like, my time and energy is really precious to me. In order for me to keep dating you, I need this from you. And it might look like more consistency. It might look like specific number of dates a week. Set whatever kind of boundary you feel appropriate. And then it's up to them as to whether they step up to that or not. But whether they do or not has no reflection on your worth and your internal abandonment wound that's going on underneath the surface, because it actually doesn't have anything to do with the 10%. It's just being triggered by it. Now, if you're insecurely attached and have a pattern of, trying to make things work when people aren't emotionally available, you might have a tendency to not set boundaries and to ignore what they're saying around their availability to you. If that happens and you don't set those boundaries and you don't set the follow through and walk away if they're not available, you will get triggered again and again. And the person who's responsible for that is not the person you're dating who's hot and cold, it's you. So let me know if that little boundary exercise was helpful in the comments, and if you want more content like this, please let me know. And if you struggle to set boundaries, and if you've historically come from this kind of insecure place and you did tend to chase, I really recommend you watch my proven 3 steps to a secure relationship webinar in the link below, because it goes through the process you need to go through from an internal perspective to create inner security that will help you to set boundaries and have healthy relationships in your life. And I'd love to meet you personally. I have a free Facebook group if you'd like to join us in there. The link to join is below. And if you want a free strategy session with me and my team for the Love by Design program, which is the only way you can work with me, my calendar link is in the description below. And if you found this video helpful, please click the like button to help it out in the algorithm to help this channel out. And there are some next step videos here for you to watch so that you can move one step closer to having a beautifully secure relationship with yourself, so that you can create one with the person that you really deserve. And for now, I'll see you in the next video.